Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So today I thought we'd have a bit of fun and do a prickly holly leaf with some little berries as well, and I'll show you how to make those in polymer clay. Now I first did this one just a couple of days before Christmas last year, and I posted online and I had loads of comments, so I've kept it on the back burner, waited all year, and now I've got to the stage where I've managed to do the tutorial for you, hopefully in time for you to have a bit of winter fun and make some of your own. There's various things you can do with this leaf. I've just done a little card topper here, so it's just a very flat piece with a couple of berries and things on it. You can make some earrings, flat ones, or ones which are curled like this. And of course, you know me, it's this time of year, I can't resist making a covered bauble or two, so I'll show you how to do that as well. We do this one in two parts. First of all, we're going to do the holly leaf, and we create the cane for the leaf, which actually is just one little piece, which we then put into 5 smaller pieces to do the leaf, one half and then do the other half, and then the little prickly bits we create right at the end, and you can change each leaf so each leaf is slightly different, and I'll show you how we do that. And then the little berry bit is a very simple cane, nice and easy, so I'll show you that as well. So let's get started by going through the minimal sort of equipment you need for today's session. As this is a simple cane tutorial, all we're going to need is a polymer clay blade, I sometimes refer to these as tissue blades, a craft knife, a small roller, this one's actually 1/2 inch or 1.5 centimetres in diameter. I use a 4mm cable needle, or something similar would work just as well, and in fact something which was blunt on one end and about sort of 4mm wide would work very well. I bake on a small tile, and I'll cover that in aluminium foil to protect the clay should the oven spike in temperature during baking. And I also just use a measuring sheet just when I'm reducing the cane to get my sizes. This one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. I laminate mine so I can use them several times, and I'm using the 4 squares to 1 inch one, but obviously you can get centimetres instead if you prefer. I work on a large ceramic tile, and I'll clean my hands and my equipment as I go along with biodegradable wet wipes and just tissues. You can just use wet cloths instead if you prefer. The other thing I use is a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use. If you do not have a pasta machine, then you can simply stack layers of playing cards on either side and roll across the top to give you the various thicknesses you need, and I'll put the relevant amount of cards you need for the thicknesses I'm using in the details below the video. If you want to make some earrings, I've used the fish hook findings, a couple of little oval jump rings and a couple of round jump rings, and these are 7mm and 5mm, and just a couple of jewellery pliers just to add them in once the pieces have been baked. If you want to make a decorative bauble, then I just use a plain glass one which I cover with polymer clay, and you'll need some scrap clay and some metallic leaf, and I give you the details of all of those in the polymer clay metallic leaf ornaments video, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. And I will bake it just sat in a bowl with some aluminium foil wrapped over the top. So let's move on to the clay. The clay I'm using today is Fimo Soft, but all well-known and recognised brands of polymer clay will work well for this technique. So for the leaf, we've got all of these amounts. Now I'm using quite a large amount here to show you the leaf. If you're just making it for yourself, you can do with just using half of these amounts if you would rather. So we have got tropical green with a bit of black, vanilla, pistachio and sunflower yellow. So for these amounts we've got 1/2 ounce or 14 grams, and this bit obviously I've taken 3/4 of that is emerald green and 1/4 is the black. Same amount, so this 1/2 ounce, 14 grams of the vanilla. And then for the outside colour, you can just use the pistachio if you want, however it just makes it slightly brighter and gives a more sort of realistic green if you add this amount of yellow. So this is very roughly about 2/3 of an ounce of the pistachio, 1/3 of the lemon yellow, so about sort of 19 grams, 10 grams, you know, something along those lines for those two. So that is all we need to create the leaf. And then to do the berry, we've got cherry red, Indian red, sunflower yellow, a little bit of white and a little bit of black, and we've got 1/4 ounce or 7 grams of both of these. 1/8 of an ounce or 3.5 grams of the yellow, and then tiny amounts, about 1/16 of an ounce or about 2 grams of the white and the black. And the first thing I will do is get them all conditioned, and I'll do that using my pasta machine, and I'll condition them thoroughly on setting 3, which is a medium setting, and on my pasta machine 0 is thick and 9 is thin. If you're unsure about conditioning clay, how to do it or why we do it, I do have a video with a few hints and tips and techniques, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this one. So we're going to start with the leaf, so I'll get all of those conditioned into those sheets on setting number 3 and bring you back, and we'll start off to create our holly leaf. We'll start by doing a skinner blend between the dark green, the emerald and the tropical green, and as I normally do with my skinner blends, I'm just going to cut diagonally through the end pieces straight down the middle piece, and I don't cut quite to the corners just because I want a little bit of each of the colours left, and they don't have to be exact rectangles but just roughly the same sort of size. Layer them on top of each other, place the emerald down the middle on the diagonal, and then the green so it fits back on top to make more of a rectangle. Give it a slight roll to make sure the layers are all put together, and then I'm going to put back through the pasta machine. First thing I do is I fold it up just to give an easier way of putting it through so the colours don't split apart when they go through, and because I've got 3 layers now, having conditioned it on setting number 3, I will now put it up to a thicker setting, setting number 2. For anyone unsure about skinner blends, I do have a video with a few hints and tips and techniques to give you some idea of how to get a good skinner blend, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. So all I'm going to do, as always, pinch across the fold first, and then each time you put it through, fold bottom to top till we get a nice blend through from the dark all the way through to the lighter green, and I'll bring you back when we've got that done. When we've got our blend done, we're going to cut it into even strips. About this width, I would normally do that in 3 strips, but do whatever size feels right for you, depending on the width you've got. And we're just going to layer them up, one on top of the other. Pinch at the dark ends, because that's the end we're going to put back through the pasta machine. And you can just press gently down along the length to make sure that these don't split apart when you put it through the pasta machine, and put in on that same setting, so setting number 2 for me, pinched end first until we get a longer, thinner strip. And now we want to use the pasta machine if you've got one, or between your playing cards if you haven't, to get the longest, thinnest strip of polymer clay you can get. So for me, that'll be down to setting 9 on my pasta machine. And I will put that straight down to that setting because I know my pasta machine's a good one. However, if you know that your pasta machine shreds or tears your clay at the thinner settings, just go down 1 setting at a time until you get to your thinnest usable setting. So here we have the long thin strip. So we're going to concertina this from one end to the other. We're going to do it quite nice and wide today because we're going to chop this in half in a second. So probably about 1.5 inches, about 4 centimetres wide across this way, and just go from one end to the other, making sure you're not having any air trapped in the folds as you go, and just slowly make your way down till you have a relatively nice neat oblong. And then I'm just going to press down on my tile at either end just to flatten it off, because I'm not too worried about the ends because they'll always become distorted when we make our cane anyway. So I just want a rough sort of nice rectangular shape, and then I'm going to cut it straight down the middle. And I'm going to put it so that you've got the 2 light ends together. And this will now form the basis of our cane for our leaf. So this will be the main part of one side of the leaf, and we need to get this down into 5 decreasing sizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this more into a sort of square shape, and by pressing in as I work along the length, I will gradually decrease and reduce this cane. I'm going to do it till I get it to about 4.5 inches or about 12 centimetres, and then I'm going to cut off 1.5 inch piece, and if you're working in the centimetres, then take off 4 centimetre piece, and then I'm going to repeat that so we end up with the pieces. So I'll fast forward through to that stage because it's simply a case of reducing, cutting off a piece, reducing down, cutting off a piece. And then for the last two pieces, we just do something very slightly different. And for the last two pieces, we've already more or less got it to the 3 inches, but I'm just going to press it slightly smaller and concentrate on pressing one end slightly smaller. So I'm going to taper one end. So we're going to end up with one piece, again, that's just fractionally smaller, which is the 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to go smaller on this end, so that when we cut, we've got the 1.5, which is just slightly smaller, and then the smallest piece is there. So there are our 5 pieces, and they're going to sit in the leaf that way. And what we're going to do, we're going to give ourselves a head start by creating some points at this stage on these blocks before we put them together. And we're going to do that using our outside colour clay, so this mix of the pistachio and the sunflower yellow. I'm going to take about half the clay, put half to one side because we use that to wrap around the outside when we're finished, and this bit I'm going to roll into a log. The first piece is normally wide enough that you can take your larger roller, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down into the light green part to create a groove, and then we'll get some of this lighter green clay and just cut it off so it fits in. The second piece you can generally just about get the roller in again, and we'll make this piece slightly smaller. And again, he just sits in the top. And for the 3 smaller pieces, I use the cable needle and press down and roll wide for the next size down, and then slightly smaller again for the remaining pieces. And again, just roll this out slightly smaller till it fits in the groove that you've made. Put the remaining on one side because again we can use that to wrap around the outside, and we just need to change the shape of these slightly because we've squashed them flat by pressing down. So I'm just going to turn them on the side, so that way up, and then just with my thumb just press down along one side, turn over, do the same along the other side, and what we're looking for is a more of an oblong shape than a square shape. So just repeat that with the others. And I've also concentrated on making sure they're all the same height still. So those are our pieces. So what we need to do now is to get some veins in between them. So I'm going to take the lighter colour, so this was the vanilla. I'm going to again take half of it, and this has gone through on the setting 3 when we conditioned it, and I'm going to put it through on setting 5, so a thinner setting, to create some veins down the sides of our leaves. And using the first one as a guide, I'm going to roughly chop it to size. And then we're going to start down one side of a leaf, but not right up to the top. So you want some of the dark clay showing. Chop off. And then just to make it a nicer point, I'm just going to smooth with the cable needle to smooth that blunted end of the clay up. Again, it doesn't have to be the same all the way down because every slice can be different. And then turn him up. Do the same with the next piece. So again, not quite up to the dark, cut off any excess. And do the same for the next two, but not the final one. And we didn't need it on the final one because you've got the 4 in between the other pieces, and this one's going to fold over and become the top. So what we need to do is we need to change the orientation of them slightly, because obviously at the moment these veins are coming straight out and we want them to go slightly upwards. So I normally start with our top piece. So I'll put it down as if it was lying, the thin green piece going upwards. And I will press down and curve over the top and press down on the bottom. So I've created more sort of that shape, because the second piece then lies next to it with the vein going outwards towards the top, because this is the top, and then I'm just going to gently twist him and press him over whilst at the same time pressing down. So you can see there. Repeat with the third piece. So each time I put it up, I'm putting it so it's at the bottom. So I'm sitting it at the bottom and then just gently pressing it forwards and upwards. Same with the fourth. And then lastly with the fifth. So it's like a forward motion we're going for. Just pressing them slightly up. And what you'll see there is that we've then got the veins that are starting to go slightly upwards. So I'm just going to elongate this slightly because we need to cut this in half. So I'm just pulling it gently with my fingers wider. Doesn't need to be too wide, only about sort of a couple of inches, about 5 centimetres. And we've got it roughly to the size, then just chop down through the middle. And we'll start to see our holly leaf coming together. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of the vanilla. So I want it on setting 3, so if you happen to have enough, which I think I might have here, just about, it needs to go just below the top again, but all the way down to the bottom. So if I pull it ever so slightly, I've got just enough there. And again, at the top place, we're just going to roll with that cable needle so it's not a blunt end, and then the two pieces can go together. And the last thing we're going to do is going to wrap the whole piece in some more of this outside colour. So I'm going to fold this so it's roughly the same width as our piece, and then put it through the pasta machine, folds at the sides. I put it through on setting number 3, see if I can get a piece that's going to wrap the whole way round. Yes, there's plenty there. If you wanted, you could do it slightly thicker size, but I quite like it. Just this thin outer layer looks quite good as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just cutting it roughly to size by using the blade either side. Give myself a flat end, and I'm not going quite down to the bottom, but nearly, and then wrapping that all the way around, and again stopping not quite at the bottom, and again we're just going to roll with the cable needle just to not give ourselves quite such a blunt edge at the bottom. That's our leaf finish. And what we need to do now is to reduce it in shape, and I find it easier to reduce more in sort of like a diamondy type shape or a square shape. So I'm going to use my fingers to start with and press in both at the top and the bottom. And because of the way we've done the leaf, you'll tend to find that this bit's sort of shorter than these bits, and that's brilliant because that's the sort of the shape that the holly leaf needs to be. And when I've got it sort of roughly in that shape, I can turn it on its side and then continue using that shape by pulling longer, rotating and pulling. It's not a job you need to rush, you can take your time. If it becomes uneven, you can turn it on the side and pull it down towards the tile just to flatten out the bottoms. If you've got things like the cane savers or the cane caps, put those on top and use those. I'll put a link to them in the details below the video. They just help with any distortion on either end. But I must admit, I always need a lot of scrap clay, so I don't mind too much distortion on the ends. And just keep on going, pulling it out in that square shape or that diamond shape. And it goes smaller and smaller as you go. Once you've got it to a size you're happy with, I'm just going to, with my fingers, press down just to round off the two of the side pieces. And then there's two ways that we can get that nice sharp pointed edge. The first thing you need to do is to get it to the size you want. So I'm going to keep this one quite large today just to show you the process, but I'll then take a bit of it down a lot smaller when I do some of the decorations with it. But just to show you the two ways you can do it. First one, I'm just going to chop through so we can see what we've got. So you can see there is the leaf. And we've already got that slight point coming up where all the dark green pieces are. So first thing you can do, and I'll do a different one on each side, is take your cable needle and everywhere that you've got that little dimple in, just press in and give a little round with the needle. So you're creating a shape on the outside. And this is why we have to wait till it's the size that we want to cut our slices for before we do this, because obviously if you did this and then reduced it down further, that would all go. And you can normally do this enough that you can get 2 or 3 slices, and then you have to go back in and redo this. So you can see I haven't gone far down the side, just enough to get that couple of slices. Then because we've got a nice flat side, you can put it down on its side and take a slice. Because I was sort of off camera there cutting, I've cut quite a thick slice. You can obviously cut thinner. And then all I'm going to do is with my fingers just point off all those bits where we've gone in with the cable needle, and you get a pointed holly leaf. Give it a little bit of a curve round. And there's our first one, ready for whatever pattern or design we're going to do. The other way you can do it is to take a slice without putting the curves in around the outside. And laying it flat on your tile with something like a cable needle. And in actual fact, if you've got something that's got a flat round bottom, it's even better. But again, just press in with your cable needle to round off all those places where we've got that little bit of the extra of the outside colour. And then same again, once you've got that going, with your fingers, create the sharp points. A little bit of a curl again. And there's our second leaf. So 2 different ways that you can create the leaves, either before you slice and then a bit of manipulation, or after you slice and manipulation, whichever you want to do. So I'll get a couple more of these done. I'll reduce one down and make it much smaller to show you what that looks like in the finished piece. So I think what we need here, what's really calling out for, is a couple of berries. The holly berry is relatively straightforward, and having conditioned the clay on setting 3, I've actually put it down onto setting 4, so one thinner, simply because it's such a small piece of yellow, it makes it easier if you go on a thinner setting. So same as before, diagonally through the 2 end pieces, straight down the middle pieces, and this one's going to be slightly sort of misshapen because there's such a small amount of yellow, but I don't really want a lot of yellow showing, just a little bit, sort of just a tinge more towards of an orangey colour. So I'm just going to put that in like that, and I'm not worried about having too much of the actual yellow showing. Just give it a roll, and with the white and the black I've just simply conditioned them and put them into a little sausage shape for now. So put those to one side, and as we did before, fold over, put through one setting thicker, so for me this will be setting number 3 now, and keep putting through, folding bottom to top till we've got the nice blend through from one side to the other, and I'll bring you back when I've got that done. So there we go, And I've kept it fairly short by abutting it up next to the side of the pasta machine because I want enough to take 3 slices. So the first one's going to go through the thin setting by itself. Those two are going to go together. So as per normal with this one where I've got the more than one piece, I'll put it back through the same setting first to get myself a slightly longer piece. And then both of these I'm going to put through my thinnest usable setting dark end first to get as long and thin a strip as I can on for the 2 separate pieces. Take your black, and we only want a tiny little bit. This is going to be the pinpoint right at the middle of our berry. So about that sort of size. You can see it is relatively small, and taking our smaller piece, put that right in the middle, and then start to roll from the dark end round all the way up till we get to the slightly more orangey bit. Okay. Now we want a little bit of a highlight from our berry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this white and just with our fingers press it. So it's sort of a thickish sort of setting, but long enough that it's going to go over the roll. Sit that on one side. You don't want it going more than about 1/3 of the way around, so that's about fine. And with the leftover bits, I'm just going to create a little bit of a roll, and opposite our white piece, just add an extra little highlight. I'm going to add a slight little groove, not much, just a little bit, and just a tiny little dot of white goes in there. And now we can roll the rest of that up from the orange going up to the darker red again. And that is our berry done. So all we're going to do now is we're going to reduce it. So I'm reducing it by pressing in with my fingers, and then I'll start rolling once I've got it nicely pressed in. I'm not too worried about the mess on the outside. That's not going to show on the final bits. And if it does show when I take those slices, then I will just take off a tiny bit from the inside of the slices. So we'll give it a roll. And I'm reducing this one in the round shape, so what I'm doing is whilst I'm rolling, I'm actually pulling outwards with my fingers. And then we will chop down through and see what we have. And there you have the holly berries with that little bit of highlight in. So I'm just going to take one piece. And again, starting it off, pressing it in with the fingers. Just helps the clay to move more easily if you press it in first. And then give it a roll. So I want a berry that's going to be about the right sort of size to fit in with those, and then I'm going to take 3 slices. So we'll have 3 berries to go with the 3 leaves. So there we go, holly leaves and berries in polymer clay, and that would make a lovely card topper, or just to add to any sort of seasonal display, winter display, something along those lines. Another thing that's good fun to do with them is to make yourself a pair of holly earrings. Now these ones I've just done completely flat, and these were just the larger cane, and I just made sure the points were nice and broad, and I've kept it quite thick, so it's got a good bit of integrity once it's done, and it's not going to catch in the hair too much, and I haven't made them sharp, so it's not going to stick on the neck. Baked them just flat on the tile with a piece of card underneath so it didn't go shiny on the underneath, and then to finish them off I've got a couple of jump rings and one of the fish hook findings. So the first jump ring just goes through the hole I made, and obviously I made the hole before baking, although you could of course drill afterwards, and I just made it using a needle. Put it in, turn it round so that the join is at the bottom, and I've got one of the little oval rings, so that slips over there. And And there we have a pair of earrings. So rather than doing flat ones, you can also add some texture or some shape. So with the cable needle, I'm just going to run the needle down the middle line, up down the veins, only on one side. And then I can sort of curl that up along the vein, and you can twist them around. Again, I've done these quite thick, but again not made it so that it's sharp. And add the berries to the top, so one right at the top and a couple just below, and with the needle I'm just going to go through the top of the berry and then twist through, go around to make sure I've got a nice hole. And then I've already done the other side, so you can either have them sort of mirroring each other, or you can have them completely different. I might carry on playing around with it for a bit more, but when I'm happy I'll put them on tile, bake them, and when they're baked add the findings, and I will have a second pair of prickly holly earrings. So here's the piece that I did as a card topper, so it's all baked and then it can sort of sit and decorate a card or any other thing you want to do, just a bit of seasonal decoration. And there are our two pairs of earrings, all now finished baked. So you can either have them where you've added some movement and put a bit of shaping into them, or have them completely flat, whichever you prefer. And just to show you something else, I've done 15 leaves and 30 of the holly berries. I don't know whether I'm going to use all of those yet. We'll see how much room I've got. And I've covered a glass bauble in some of the polymer clay and metallic leaf. And I show you how to do this in the polymer clay and metallic leaf ornament video, which I did last year. And I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. So if you wanted to do something like this, you could. And all I'm going to do, because this is still unbaked, I'm just going to start adding some holly leaves. And there's enough metallic leaf that you can pull them off and move them round, but there's enough polymer clay that will actually stick whilst it bakes. So there we go, another option for you for using the holly leaves and the holly berries. So there is our covered bauble, all finished. I've just put the lid top back on, so a little bit of ribbon or something on that, and it'll be lovely to decorate the tree. So that was done with the blue metallic leaf on a dark blue clay background. This one was using purple metallic leaf on a black background. This one was using gold metallic leaf on a black background, and then this one I just used silver metallic leaf on a black background. So again, lots of different effects you can get, lots of different colours you can use, and create some decorative baubles as you wish. So there we go, that's the project finished for today, the prickly holly leaf in polymer clay, with the little red berries that go with it. I hope you enjoyed that. So here's just some ideas of things you can do, but obviously I'm sure you're going to come up with loads of your own as well. Thank you so much for watching, and as always a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. I think I'm going to go and have a play and make some wonderful holly pieces, and hopefully I'll see you next time for my next video. Bye for now. Bye.